Somewhere in Kosovo, there are thousands looking for other ways out, now that the main escape route is apparently being cut by a NATO strike. Paul Welsh, BBC News, Montenegro.
So far,
8 agencies launch a joint appeal to help the refugees.
2 Libyans
with Frank Partridge and Vivian Krieger.
Good morning. The second week of Operation Allied Force ending with the heaviest bombardment yet of targets in Yugoslavia. Main developments this morning.
The Serbian authorities are claiming that a cruise missile hit a residential area in the town of Aleksinac. At least 5 people are said to have been killed and more than 30 injured.
RAF pilots took part in last night's attacks, which came in 4 waves. NATO took advantage of better weather to strike targets across Serbia and Kosovo, including an oil refinery, roads and bridges.
More than 1,000 refugees have been flown to Turkey at the start of an airlift to relieve the pressure on Albania and Macedonia. Tens of thousands of ethnic Albanians are still queuing to cross the border out of Kosovo.
Well, as we were mentioning, Britain's leading aid agencies have launched a nationwide joint appeal to help the Kosovar refugees. The Disasters Emergency Committee fundraising effort is backed by 12 organisations, and we can cross live now to their news conference, which is in central London.
And I have 3 colleagues here from the agencies. Sam Younger, the Director General of the British Red Cross, Julian Filichowski, who is the Director of CAFORD, and Anna Annan, who's Christian Aid Albania Assessment Team, who's actually come back from Albania. We'll go around very quickly and then we'll take the questions. Sam, if you'd like to start, please.
Thank you, Paul. I think it's clear to everybody why an appeal of this sort is so important at the moment. We've all seen and heard about the flood of refugees crossing the borders into Albania, Macedonia and into Montenegro. The latest figures we have suggest that there's getting on for 500,000 people now who are refugees. The reason for the appeal being timed now by the DEC is not that this is the first action by the agencies. All of the agencies have been involved on the ground well before now. If I can take the example of the British Red Cross, working through our Red Cross colleagues in Albania in particular, but also in Macedonia and in Montenegro, there have been supplies in stock on the ground which helped to meet the initial needs of the refugees first coming out. Those
catastrophe is unfolding.
All the women are crying, they are desperately traumatized.
We are going to see this through. That is fine.
You will have to, but how will you cope?
We will do the best we can to get these people out of their wretched conditions and into something more humane. I cannot guarantee that we're going to have tents for that number if it happens in a very short period of time. We've exhausted pretty much the stocks of tents in theatre, but more are arriving. There's a very heavy airlift now coming into Skopje Airport. 30 aircraft yesterday, I believe, forecast 50 today. So it's balancing the numbers coming in against what we can do, and we're going flat out.
Now, yesterday, the humanitarian organizations, in particular the UNHCR, were deeply worried about the Macedonian government apparently obstructing the number who could be processed through the camps. What view are you taking of this?
The Macedonian government obviously have their problems, and I'm very sympathetic to them. I mean, we're here, we know what strain they're under, and they're doing their best, in my view. They have now relaxed, my understanding is they've relaxed the requirement for registration at the border itself. We are taking people about 5 to 6 miles to the south to the large transit centre we've got on a grass airstrip, and they are prepared to do registration there. That was information I got this morning from one of the ministers concerned.
But is it likely that this is now going to remain a serious problem, if you like, the balancing act between the humanitarian pressures and the political pressures?
Well, I think that's inevitable. What is important is for the international community to be working very fast indeed for the dispersal plan for these refugees coming down from Kosovo into Macedonia. What we don't want to do is finish up with very large numbers indeed in hurriedly built camps which are not properly adequate for any length of time. Therefore, it's very important that the international community gets a move on as to moving these wretched people onwards to something rather better than we can offer. I must say, what we can offer is a damn sight better than what they've had to live through for the last few days.
General, some 12,000 NATO troops are well advanced, building 6 tented camps with a capacity for up to 100,000 refugees. But there are already more refugees than that inside Macedonia. In Albania, meanwhile, there are now more than 250,000 refugees. NATO forces, including 5 large helicopters, are airlifting supplies up to Kukes and beyond to the border with Kosovo. Up to 8,000 troops are also on their way. And Albania is now becoming part of the military operation against Serb forces inside Kosovo. Soon there will be a NATO headquarters, plus the 24 American Apache attack helicopters and the multiple launch rocket systems which will be targeted into Kosovo.
For 2 years, and that they were nowhere near the center. 3 streets away from where the missiles fell, the shockwaves had blown out most of the windows in the shopping area. This tragedy will be used by the Yugoslav authorities to reinforce public opinion here, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Tim Marshall, Sky News, Alexinet.
Well, Sky's Emma Heard is with the...
Is a problem. Exhaustion is another problem.
So there are no facilities have been set up as yet to cope with the sick?
Facilities are being set up. The camp that you can see behind me is the holding area just this side of the Macedonian border. It's here where they're bussed away from, but some of them have been here for several days and the conditions aren't very sanitary. The aid agencies have set up medical tents here, but really the aim is to get these people out of this area to receive medical attention in the NATO camps themselves. Some of them are too seriously sick to cope with that and have to be dealt with here, but the chaos that we saw in the first few days of this operation seems to be lessening. They seem to be getting their act together here, but it's still a very slow process.
Is food and water distributed with any regularity at all?
Food and water is getting in. That has now been organised. It's being taken by the tractors down to these people in this camp, and obviously in the NATO camps they are getting adequate food. Some of the soldiers there, we've heard, have even given up some of their own rations to make sure these people have got enough to eat. But we understand there is enough food in this country to feed all these people. What concerns these people now, and the main concern of the aid agencies here, is the whole issue of these airlifts. Some people, you may have seen the pictures, were airlifted out to Turkey last night. They were bussed away from here. They weren't told where they were going. They arrived at the airport and said, "Where are you taking us?" And only then were they told, "Well, you're going to Turkey." And they said, "Well, we don't want to go." They were given no choice. They were shoved onto these planes and taken away. The aid agencies say that should not be happening. What they're doing is talking to the Macedonian government today to say that this is against everything that they stand for. These people are being sent out to places where they don't want to go, often without their other family members. So that is an issue which has to be sorted out very urgently in Macedonia. Who goes on these airlifts and whether they're given any choice where they want to go and whether they want to go at all.
Emma, for the moment, thank you very much.
And I get through from the rear window in the back and kicked out of this house. By his trying to leave from that horrible scene, he had just heard his sister voice, just 2 years old, crying and asking for help.
But he couldn't pick her up because he'd been shot in the arm. His grandparents are now with him in the safety of Albania. Many more people are trying to get into this camp, but the Red Cross Field Hospital is not quite ready. When it is, there will be a clamour for places. But with tens of thousands of people waiting for help, the vast majority are bound to be disappointed. Ross Appleyard, Sky News, Albania.
Sanitation, get some water and some medical care. You say at last. A lot of people will have been looking at the pictures for the last week and have been having the feelings that you had on the border, which is, why on earth is it taking this long? Surely this could have been foreseen.
Field. It's the stink of an unwashed mass of humanity, of sewage, of disease, and of death. They are being moved out at long last, but they're arriving over the border in just as greater numbers. The official figures speak for themselves. 67,000 now in NATO camps, 65,000 estimated to be waiting in the field and over the border in Kosovo. They're falling like flies as exhaustion, disease and nighttime hypothermia strike. No one keeps count of the number of sick, or for that matter of the dead. Over 30 in 2 days was one figure, but that was 2 days ago. It's not easy for the sick to get attention, hemmed in as they are by less than friendly Macedonian guards and their dogs, who are not averse to stealing food that's supposed to go to the refugees. Local ethnic Albanian aid workers have been smuggling some sick people out on their food trucks and paying the price. Even those who do get treatment find little comfort.
I don't know what is going to happen with us. We are too tired. We thought that you were going to die over there. We didn't accept to get out from there alive.
Even when they get out of here, the ordeal for these people is far from over. Most of them want to return to their homes, even though they may be burned out ruins. Instead, many will find themselves in distant lands, with a promise that one day they will return. But that may be a promise that NATO will find it hard to keep.
People are really scared what will happen with them. Now they don't want to go, and it seems to be the situation that they haven't got a choice now.
Do you think they'll ever come back?
We hope so, and of course they hope so. But now when families, they will be separated. Some people are in England, some in the United States, some in Germany, and it will be a long process before this is over.
But for many of these people, their agony may never end. Keith Graves, Sky News, on the Kosovo-Macedonian border.
It's time to take a look at the sport.
Il secondo problema è sicuramente quello della patologia respiratoria acuta, bronchiti e polmoniti, dovute all'esposizione al freddo, all'assenza di alloggio e anche al lungo viaggio, allo stress che questa popolazione ha subito.
Non bisogna perdere tempo nel soccorrere i profughi del Kosovo. L'Italia, attraverso l'Istituto Superiore di Sanità e con l'appoggio dell'Esercito, sta portando in Albania un ospedale da campo per far fronte all'emergenza sanitaria.
Di cosa c'è bisogno in questi campi in Albania? Beh, sicuramente di tutti i farmaci dell'assistenza primaria, ma soprattutto prima dei farmaci dell'acqua pulita, quindi, e della nutrizione, dell'alimentazione decente. Ma in termini di farmaci sarà necessario avere antibiotici in scorte sufficienti e poi farmaci per i problemi del quotidiano, dal diabete all'infartuato, dall'anziano alla donna gravida, i normali farmaci di assistenza primaria.
Sky News Today with Simon McCoy and Vivian Krieger.
Good afternoon. NATO has carried out the heaviest air raids on Yugoslavia since the start of Operation Allied Force nearly 2 weeks ago. Relief agencies are struggling to cope with more than 1 million people from Kosovo now forced from their homes. These are the main developments today.
The Serbian authorities are claiming 5 civilians died when a cruise missile hit a residential area in the town of Aleksinac. More than 30 people are said to have been injured.
The Defence Secretary...
As for refugees waiting for help, thousands are still queuing to leave Kosovo. Britain's International Aid Secretary Claire Short says no one will be evacuated to another country against their will.
Last night,
the night the war came to a small mining town in Serbia. These were residential streets, not a sign of anything military. The emergency services say they were hit by cruise missiles which killed 5 people, injured 30, 5 seriously. The target, probably a barracks on the outskirts of town, at least a kilometre from here.
This is one of the strikes of the spots. There is another one, also totally civilian building, maybe 5 meters away from first aid unit and hospital.
It was just a matter of time before something like this happened, and the time was 9:40 p.m. 3 cruise missiles hit the center of town. We're told that 2 people died in the house behind me. The emergency services have yet to finish checking all the houses. The dead were taken to the morgue, the injured to a hospital in the city of Niš. Men, women and children were all caught in the blast. Most people had been in the shelters, otherwise there would have been more casualties. They emerged to view the wreckage of the town centre. This man told us he heard the missiles coming in quick succession, and then, in his words, disaster. He was still in a state of shock hours after the bombing. Many buildings were in ruins, and several hundred dwellings were damaged. Immediate first aid was given here, in premises smashed a few minutes earlier, the staff also in shock. The people here are absolutely furious. They cannot understand why the town was targeted or how NATO got it so badly wrong. We're sure the smart bombs dumbed down and the civilians paid the price. As they cleared up, those questions were asked over and over again. People we talked to in private, away from the police, said the barracks had been empty for 2 years and that they were nowhere near the centre. 3 streets away from where the missiles fell, the shockwaves had blown out most of the windows in the shopping area. This tragedy will be used by the Yugoslav authorities to reinforce public opinion here, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Tim Marshall, Sky News, Alexinets.
New evidence is emerging of Serb atrocities in Kosovo. Sky's Ross Appleyard is at the Albanian border town of Kukus, and he's been hearing one 10-year-old boy's story.
One begins to wonder if the misery will ever come to an end. But every day brings new horrors, each story more graphic, more poignant and more distressing. A 10-year-old boy from Žakovica escaped a massacre by playing dead, the bodies of his brothers and sisters piled around him.
And one by one, all of us got killed. After they finished shooting on the people and be sure that all are dead, start putting fire on the house. As the Serbian forces get to the front door preparing to put fire on the house, by considering all the people had been dead, and the young boy trying in their own face not to get picked that he's still alive. And I get through from the rear window in the back and kicked out of this house. By his trying to leave from that horrible scene, he had just heard his sister voice, just 2 years old, crying and asking for help.
But he couldn't pick her up because he'd been shot in the arm. His grandparents are now with him in the safety of Albania. Many more people are trying to get into this camp, but the Red Cross Field Hospital is not quite ready. When it is, there will be a clamour for places. But with tens of thousands of people waiting for help, the vast majority are bound to be disappointed. Ross Appleyard, Sky News, Albania.
Well, now we can cross live to Ross at the Albanian border.
For miles and miles in these carts, without any hope, desperately trying to escape the Serb atrocities. The only glimmer of hope they might have is this camp that's behind me, but that will hold 3,000 people. That is a drop in the ocean compared to the number of people that have come here to park on this waste ground to try and get in. Conditions here on the ground are terrible. If you just have a look with me around the camp, this is the type of place people have been staying. People have been living in these carts for sometimes up to a month. I spoke to one family this morning that has spent a month on the road. The children sleep in there, the babies sleep outside. All very well in the sunshine, you might think. That looks nice and healthy and happy for a baby, but at night it gets very, very cold. The cooking facilities are primitive, as you can see. A family may sit and try and have a normal meal, but they're all incredibly upset. I mean, you just have to look at the faces. Sometimes it's even difficult to look them in the eye. The way that they travel is in these carts. Now, they're sort of homemade carts. They have tarpaulins wrapped over the top of them to keep the rain out, and believe me, there is plenty of rain around. In Albania, it tends to get very wet at night, very wet and very cold. Now, these people are gathering by the thousands in this camp, in this, you can call it a camp, but it's only a piece of waste ground, and they're trying to get into the camp over here, where they can get some medical attention. Now, Dr. Gamus Hodjai, you're with the Albanian army. It must be desperately sad for you to see these people in this condition.
Really? First of all, I'd like to stress or to emphasize that it's the most difficult period of time that I've had in my life. It's a very difficult period of time here. Just the time I've been here, I've seen a lot of people, children, terrorized, stress, old women, pregnant women, children suffering from shotgun injuries, and old men crying and terrorized and stress, and really, it's unbelievable for seeing these kind of things here.
How can you cope with the number of people who are desperately trying to get help from you? It must be terrible for you not be able to help everyone.
You can't imagine it. It's a great number of people getting and encouraging every day that comes into the camp in order to get any help, medical help, I mean. But we are doing the best. We are trying and working very hard together with some Italian doctors, and I have a team here. But really, we are expecting to have a lot of problems, medical problems, I mean.
Now, at least we can hear the helicopters in the background bringing in aid. How long do you think it might be before we can cater for all these people in this area?
Really, it's I can't imagine the time that, but there are a lot of people that needs to be evacuated from here. There are a lot of people that have a lot of problems, let's say because of the shotgun injuries. We decided to make a clear decision this morning with the other doctors in order to send 3 children with bone fracture and shotgun injuries to the Tirana, the capital of Albania, to Central Mila Hospital.
I mean, how can you imagine as a doctor that people can treat young children like this?
Yes. First of all, I don't understand which are the faults of this kind of children. Because, and I mean, I feel a little bit afraid for their future, because they have seen a lot of terrible things with their eyes there. And they are seeing just a lot of not good things here.
Okay, Doctor, well, we'll let you get back to looking after the patients, and all the best with that.
And finally, first of all, I would like to thank you, and because you come from the Western country that just at this moment is having and is helping, they are doing the best for my country.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, that's a familiar theme, actually, because as we've been standing here, people have come up to us, Kosovo Albanians who speak very little English, saying, we can see Sky News in Kosovo. Thank you from the heart for broadcasting to the whole world our plight. They think they've been forgotten, and thankfully they haven't, because there are many journalists here who are covering the story and this humanitarian disaster. There's no other way to phrase it.
And the facilities for the sick, Ross, will they get better as the days go on? Things are underway.
Well, hopefully, yes. There is a Red Cross hospital being built in the camp. It's not quite finished yet. When that's up and running, that'll be able to hold 50 people in beds. But again, that's just a drop in the ocean compared to the number of people who are here. There's 1,000 people coming over the border every hour. The helicopters are a good sign, because it means that aid is getting in, and we hear that bigger and bigger helicopters are going to be arriving as the days and weeks go on. And it is a matter of days and weeks, because it's going to take that long before these people can be sorted out and moved away from the border, which the aid agencies themselves say is a very dangerous place. There are Serb guns up in the hills. Who knows what they might do if they decided they want to extract some revenge or make some kind of point. We're perfectly easily within target range.
Ross, thank you very much.
The International Development Secretary, Claire Shaw.
Misery swelling by the minute, generating a crisis that threatens to spiral out of control, with the numbers of traumatized and displaced people already nudging the 500,000 mark, and NATO governments divided over how and where to care for them. 100,000 should be given shelter in Britain, say the Americans. But Tony Blair believes they should stay in the region so they can go home after the war.
In Kukës, with a multitude of reasons to be thankful.
This bread is only the beginning, with the number of Kosovo Albanian refugees who passed through here now spiralling well above 250,000. More aid, much more, is on its way high into the mountains.
The food, we got 2 days ago 140 tons of food, which was very good. Yesterday was less, 60 tons. And we need to strengthen this pipeline by helicopter and by the road, because we cannot get so much food only by helicopter.
The majority of the refugees have been transported far down to other Albanian towns and cities, but 44,000 still sit here in Kukes in the open, waiting for someone to help them. And still, this exodus continues. Overnight, more than 40,000 more refugees came across the border. That means that since the NATO offensive began, at least 263,000 have come here into Albania. And as those numbers rise, so too does the human need. Amongst the priorities for the British aid workers now arriving here will be the provision of a clean water supply. Of the British relief agencies on the ground, 2 of them, Tear Fund and Oxfam, will be working to provide that clean water from a nearby lake.
The basic supply is there. There's a sufficient supply from the lake. We can set up a tank down there, or Oxfam will be setting up a tank down there, and purifying it, and then transporting it or pumping it up to here to serve the people at this transit site.
A few cases of measles have been identified, and a vaccination program will begin shortly. On the edge of Kukes, a transit camp set up by Italian volunteers is also opening, registering Kosovo Albanians for medicine and food. Its 500 tents will hold some 3,000 temporarily as they receive initial help after coming off the mountains. But for some, the only answer is proper hospital treatment, and that means helicopter evacuation. A number of refugee children, some of them wounded, were this morning flown to Tirana. The helicopters linking these refugees to the outside world, bringing them both sustenance and hope, are now moving high in the Albanian mountains. Clarence Mitchell, BBC News, Kukes, Northern Albania.
Ceasefire offer. Yugoslavia declares unilateral truce.
No half measures. NATO rejects hollow promise.
Air campaign, bomber attacks continue and will be unrelenting.
And the aid appeal, the charities fight to help the refugees.
Sky News Live at 5 with Jeremy Thompson and Kay Burley.
Good evening to you. Britain and America have rejected a ceasefire offer made this afternoon by Yugoslavia, saying they won't fall for a diplomatic ploy. Yugoslavia announced a unilateral ceasefire from 7 o'clock British time tonight, but said troops wouldn't be brought out until the bombing stopped. Downing Street says all NATO's demands must be met over Kosovo before it'll accept any offer from Slobodan Milosevic.